a wife, a therapist, and a husband who was told he was crazy for seeing what was right in front of him. Welcome to Cheating Wives Among Us. Today's story proves one thing: never gaslight a lawyer. It was a Wednesday in mid-November. I remember because the deposition at Northwestern Memorial had gone better than expected. The anesthesiologist cracked on redirect, admitted he'd altered the intubation notes, and opposing counsel's face went the color of old milk. We settled in the hallway for $1.8 million. My client cried. I shook hands with the other attorney, packed my briefcase, and checked my watch. 5:19 p.m. Our couples therapy was at 6 over in Lincoln Park. Dr. Ryan Ellis's office. Normally I'd drive home first, change, maybe eat something, but I was already in the neighborhood, and parking in Lincoln Park after 5:30 is its own special kind of punishment. So I drove over. Caitlin's silver Audi Q5 was already in the lot. I noticed it the way you notice anything that doesn't fit, not with alarm, just with a small hitch in your thinking. We weren't due for another 40 minutes. She was supposed to be coming from work in River North. Why would she be early? The lot was empty otherwise. Ellis ran a solo practice out of a converted brownstone. No evening staff, no receptionist after 4. The waiting room was dark when I walked in. No lights behind the frosted glass of the front desk. No soft jazz playing from the overhead speakers, which Ellis usually had going because he thought it made people feel held, which is a word therapists use when they mean compliant. I walked down the hallway. His office door was closed. I could hear voices, low, indistinct, then laughter, then a silence that wasn't silence at all. You know what I mean. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. The kind that fills a room when two people stop talking because their mouths are busy doing something else. I turned the handle, slowly, not because I was sneaking, because some part of me already knew, and that part was trying to buy the rest of me another second of not knowing. They were on the leather therapy couch, the same couch where I'd sat for 7 weeks talking about my father and my fear of becoming him. Caitlin's blouse was unbuttoned. Ellis's tie was on the floor. Their hands were where hands go when people aren't thinking about anything except each other. 3 seconds. That's how long the eye contact lasted. I know because I counted. I count things. It's what I do. In a deposition, I count the seconds a witness takes before answering. Anything over 3 means they're constructing, not recalling. Caitlin's face went through 3 expressions in those 3 seconds. Surprise, then fear, then, and this is the one that really lodged itself in me like a piece of glass, annoyance, like I'd walked in during the good part of a movie. Ellis stood up. He started to speak. Used his therapist voice, the one with the practiced warmth dialed up to 7. Nathan, I understand this is... I didn't let him finish. Not because I interrupted. I just didn't engage. I looked at him. I looked at her. Then I looked at his tie on the floor, a nice one, navy with a subtle pattern, probably $200, and I picked it up. I folded it neatly. The way my mother taught me to fold things because she said a man who can fold a shirt can hold his life together. I placed it on his desk, and I walked out. I could hear Caitlin calling my name as I went down the hallway. I could hear Ellis saying something about processing and safe space. I was already in the parking lot. Here's what I need you to understand. I didn't fold that tie because I'm some kind of ice-cold operator. I folded it because if I didn't do something precise with my hands in that moment, I was going to put them through the drywall or through Ellis's face, and I am not my father. That was the one thing I knew for certain in a moment when everything else I thought I knew was falling apart. 7 weeks earlier, I still trusted my wife. Let me back up. Late September. Chicago doing that thing it does where summer won't quite let go. The trees along the lakefront still green but tired looking. The light going gold earlier each evening. Our condo was on the 14th floor of a building in Lakeview, and from the living room you could see the lake doing its best impression of an ocean. Caitlin had put a fiddle-leaf fig in the corner that she watered with the devotion of a new mother. We did Sunday brunches at a place on Southport where they made ricotta pancakes that were worth the 40-minute wait. I was billing 200 hours a month at the firm. She'd just landed a luxury hotel chain as a client for her agency. From the outside, we looked like an ad for the kind of life people move to Chicago for. But I'd started noticing things. It began with the gym. Caitlin had an Equinox membership. She'd had it for 3 years. Good gym. She liked the classes. She liked the steam room. She liked that they had eucalyptus towels, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say out loud. Then one evening in late September, she mentioned she'd joined a new place. Better yoga, she said, not looking up from her phone. Better than Equinox? Different style, more restorative. She started going 4 times a week, always in the evening, always coming back slightly flushed, slightly distracted. She'd shower immediately. She never used to shower right when she got home. She'd pour a glass of wine first, tell me about her day, complain about a coworker she called the human spreadsheet. Now she went straight to the bathroom and closed the door, then the phone. One morning I picked it up from the kitchen counter to check the time. Mine was charging in the bedroom. And when I tried to swipe, the passcode didn't work. I'd known her passcode for years. She knew mine. It wasn't a trust thing. It was just practical. Need to call an Uber from whoever's phone is closest. Need to look something up. You know how it works when you live with someone. Hey, did you change your passcode? She was at the counter, slicing an avocado. Huh? Oh, yeah, I do that every few months. Security thing. She said it like she was reading it off a card. Since when? Since always. She had never changed her passcode, not once in 8 years. Then the lingerie. I wasn't snooping. I was putting laundry away, which I did every Thursday because we'd split the chores when we first moved in. And I am, for better or worse, a man who honors a system. There were new pieces in her drawer, not the kind she'd buy for a regular Tuesday, the kind with tags from boutiques on Oak Street that cost more than my first suit. But she wasn't wearing any of it. Not for me. I checked, not in a detective way, just in the way you notice that your wife is wearing the same old cotton to bed every night while a drawer full of black lace sits untouched. Except it wasn't untouched. Some of it was missing on the nights she went to yoga. And then there was Amy. Amy and I are going to grab drinks after work on Thursday, Caitlin said one evening. She's this new girl at the agency. We've really been connecting. I nodded. I don't think you've mentioned her before. Haven't I? She's great. She's in accounts. You'd like her. Here's the thing. I'd been to every single one of Caitlin's agency events. The holiday party, the summer rooftop thing, the client dinners where I was the charming husband. I knew her team. I knew accounts. There was no Amy in accounts. I told myself there could be a new hire. People start jobs all the time. Not everything is a red flag. Then one night, it must have been early October by then, I reached for Caitlin's phone on the nightstand. I just wanted to check whether we had an early alarm set. She was across the room hanging up a blazer, and she moved. Fast, like I'd picked up something hot. She crossed the room in 3 steps and took the phone out of my hand with a grip that was just a little too firm. Sorry, she laughed. I'm just weird about my phone. Since when? Since always. That phrase again, since always. her default setting for anything she didn't want to explain. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling. I could hear Caitlin's breathing next to me, slow, even, untroubled, the breathing of a woman with nothing on her conscience. I'm a lawyer. I deal in evidence. I watch people lie for a living, and I've gotten good, very good, at knowing when someone is constructing a story versus recalling one. But Caitlin wasn't like the witnesses I deposed. She didn't hesitate, didn't over-explain, didn't add unnecessary detail. She lied the way most people tell the truth, smoothly, briefly, and without looking away. My mother raised me alone after my father left. She worked 2 jobs. She taught me to iron my own shirts by the time I was 11, and to look people in the eye when they were talking. She also taught me this: a good man trusts Nathan. A suspicious man eats himself alive. I'd watched my father do that, turn the house into a courtroom, interrogate my mother about where she'd been, who she'd talked to, why the gas tank was lower than he expected. He was wrong every time. She was faithful. He was just broken, and his brokenness drove her away. I didn't want to be him. So I decided to trust. A few nights later, I tried the soft approach. We were on the couch, some show neither of us was really watching flickering on the screen. I muted it. "Hey, is everything okay with us?" Caitlin looked at me, and here's what she did so well that it still makes my chest tight thinking about it, her eyes filled with tears. Not a lot, just enough. She put her hand on mine. "I've been feeling it too," she said. "This distance, I hate it. I don't know where it came from, me neither. Maybe we should talk to someone, like professionally." "You mean therapy?" "Couples therapy. I've actually been thinking about it. A girl at work, Priya, she saw this therapist who was amazing, Dr. Ryan Ellis. He wrote a book about emotional intelligence in relationships. He's supposed to be really good." I felt something loosen in my chest. She was trying. She saw the distance, too. She wanted to fix it. I was the one building walls, and she was standing on the other side with a rope. "Yeah," I said, "let's do that." She smiled, warm, relieved, the smile I'd fallen in love with at a rooftop bar 8 years ago when she told me that marketing was just lying with fonts, and I laughed so hard I knocked over my drink. I called Dr. Ellis's office the next morning. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for another 7 weeks, was that Caitlin had been sleeping with Ryan Ellis since early July, a full 3 months by the time I sat down on his couch for the first time, that she hadn't heard about him from any coworker named Priya, that she was bringing me into her lover's office so he could take me apart from the inside, so he could turn my own mind against me while they carried on 2 feet from where I sat. I didn't know any of that. I just thought my wife wanted to save our marriage. Ellis's office was in a brownstone on a tree-lined street in Lincoln Park, the kind of block where every building looks like it was designed to make you feel a little poor. Inside, the office was all exposed brick and warm lighting and carefully casual bookshelves, 2 leather chairs angled toward a couch, his degrees on the wall, Northwestern for undergrad, Loyola for his MFT, his book on the shelf, spine out, but not too prominently displayed. The whole room said, "I'm accomplished but approachable." Trust me, he stood when we came in. Firm handshake, good eye contact. He was maybe 6'1", 42, the kind of fit that comes from a personal trainer and a low-carb diet. He wore a charcoal sweater over a collared shirt, sleeves pushed up just enough to show a watch that cost more than my car payment. His voice was what got me, though, this low, steady baritone that made everything he said sound like the most reasonable thing in the world. "Nathan, Caitlin, Thanks for being here. Most couples wait until things are really bad before they walk through that door. The fact that you're here early says a lot about your commitment to each other. I liked him immediately. I liked the way he said commitment, like it was something rare and precious. I liked that he didn't jump into diagnosis or ask who wanted to go first. He just asked us to tell him about how we met. Caitlin told the story. She was good at it, the rooftop bar, the spilled drink, how I'd walked her home even though she lived in the opposite direction from my apartment. Ellis laughed at the right parts. He leaned in when Caitlin talked about our first year. And when he looked at me, his expression said, "You're lucky, man." The first session felt like a good conversation with a smart friend. Ellis used something he called emotionally focused therapy. He explained it to us. It's about understanding the attachment patterns you bring into a relationship, identifying where you get stuck, and learning to reach for each other instead of pulling away. It sounded right. It sounded like exactly what we needed. Then, about 30 minutes in, he asked me about the phone incident. I'd mentioned it offhand the night Caitlin grabbed her phone, how it had felt weird. I didn't make a big deal of it. Ellis nodded slowly, the way a doctor does when you mention a symptom that's more significant than you think. "Nathan, can I ask you something? Has anyone ever told you that you can be a bit vigilant? I don't mean that as a criticism, but some people are hyper-aware of their environment. They notice small things. They track patterns. In a lot of contexts, that's a huge strength. But in a relationship, it can feel like surveillance," I finished. "Exactly. Where does that come from, do you think?" And just like that, I was talking about my father, about the interrogations at the dinner table, about the way he'd check the odometer on my mother's car, about the divorce when I was 12, and the quiet relief I felt when he finally moved out. Ellis listened like nobody had ever listened to me before. When I finished, he said, "Nathan, that's really important. Sometimes we inherit patterns from the people who hurt us. Not because we want to, because we're trying to prevent the same outcome, but the prevention becomes the problem." I felt something crack open inside me, not in a bad way, in the way a bone sets after being broken, painful, but correct. Caitlin reached for my hand. I let her take it. In the second session, Ellis introduced what he called a trust exercise. The idea was simple. For one full week, I wouldn't ask Caitlin a single question about her schedule. Not where she was going, not when she'd be back, not who she was with. I'd just let it go. "Think of it as releasing the need for control," Ellis said, "not because Caitlin is untrustworthy, but because you deserve the peace of not monitoring. Can you try that?" I could. I did. I went a full week without asking her anything. I practiced sitting with the discomfort, the way Ellis told me to. I told myself the tightness in my stomach was just my father's ghost, rattling chains. Caitlin spent 3 evenings of that week out late. She came home smelling like a shower that wasn't ours. In the third session, something happened that I've replayed probably 1,000 times. Caitlin excused herself to use the restroom, and Ellis leaned forward in his chair, dropped his voice, not in a conspiratorial way, in a man-to-man way. "Nathan, I want to be straight with you." Therapist hat off for a second. He paused, like what he was about to say cost him something. "I don't think Caitlin is doing anything wrong. I think your anxiety is building a story. And I think, honestly, if you keep pushing this, you're going to push her away." The room tilted. Just a little. Just enough that I had to grip the arm of the chair. "You really think it's all in my head? I think you've got a lot of unprocessed fear from your childhood. And I think that fear is writing scripts for situations that don't exist. It's incredibly common. It's not a character flaw. It's a wound. When Caitlin came back, I smiled at her. She smiled back. Ellis watched us both with the satisfied expression of a man who'd just defused a bomb. I drove home that night thinking, I almost ruined my marriage with my own paranoia. October into November. The leaves along the lakefront turned and fell, and the wind off the lake started carrying that edge that tells you winter is coming for you personally. I was in therapy every week now, and between sessions I thought about it constantly, replaying what Ellis said, writing in my journal, trying to untangle myself the way he told me to. I'd stopped checking anything. I apologized to Caitlin for being, as I put it, weird about the phone stuff. She was gracious about it. She touched my face and said, I know it comes from a good place. But there was something behind her eyes when she said it, a small light that could have been tenderness and could have been something else entirely. I chose tenderness. I chose it because Ellis had spent weeks teaching me that I was a man who saw threats where there were none, and I believed him because he was a professional and I was a mess. At work, things slipped. I was billing fewer hours. I missed a filing deadline, first time in 6 years. My best friend, Derek Holt, who ran a criminal defense practice out of an office that smelled permanently of takeout and printer toner, cornered me after a bar association lunch. What's going on with you? Derek didn't do preambles. He was built like a former offensive lineman, which he was, and he spoke with the same economy of force. Every word hit. Caitlin and I are in couples therapy. Okay, and it turns out a lot of the problems are my stuff. I've got issues from my childhood that I'm... Stop! Derek held up a hand. Stop right there. I've known you for 13 years. You are the most level-headed person I know. You once found out opposing counsel had lied to a judge, and instead of losing your mind, you filed a sanctions motion so clean it could have been framed. You don't have issues. You have a brain that works. Derek, who's this therapist? Dr. Ryan Ellis. He's good. He's got a book and everything. Derek looked at me the way he looked at clients who told him they'd only had 2 beers. But he let it go, for now. Ellis had me start journaling, write about my father, write about my fears, write about the kind of man I was afraid of becoming. I did it. I wrote pages. I brought the journal to sessions, and Ellis would read passages aloud, and then he'd interpret them in ways that made me feel like a psychological crime scene. Everything I'd ever done, every cautious question, every sideways glance at Caitlin's phone was reframed as a symptom. I was a man with a disease, and the disease was my own vigilance. Caitlin, meanwhile, got bolder. She went out. More. Came home later. Sometimes she didn't come home until midnight, and when I felt the old tightness in my gut, I'd close my eyes and breathe through it the way Ellis taught me and tell myself, this is your anxiety. This is not real. He'd rewired me. That's the only way to say it. A licensed professional had opened up my head and rearranged the furniture so that the one thing that could protect me, my instinct, was filed under pathology. There was a dinner party. A friend of ours, Jenna Whitfield, was turning 35. Nice restaurant in River North, long table, too many wine bottles. I stepped away to use the restroom, and when I came back, I saw Caitlin at the far end of the table, typing something on her phone. She looked up, saw me, and the phone disappeared into her bag like a magic trick. Smooth. Practiced. I sat down. Jenna slid into the chair next to me about 20 minutes later. Hey, she kept her voice low. Is Caitlin okay? She's been off all night. Off how? I don't know, distracted. And she was texting someone and literally hid her phone when you walked up. I watched her do it. She's private about her phone. Jenna gave me a look. Jenna was a prosecutor in the state's attorney's office. She gave looks for a living. Nate, that's not private. That's hiding something. I dismissed it. I told her she was reading too much into it. But driving home that night with Caitlin asleep in the passenger seat, her phone face down on her thigh, I felt the splinter go in, and splinters, the small ones, are the ones that get infected. That night, around 2 in the morning, I was lying in bed, unable to sleep. Caitlin was breathing that untroubled rhythm beside me. I got up, went to the living room, and opened my laptop. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I told myself that. I just Googled Dr. Ryan Ellis, Chicago therapist. His Psychology Today profile came up first. 5 stars, glowing reviews. Dr. Ellis helped save our marriage. Compassionate, insightful, transformative. His book, The Empathetic Edge, was listed on Amazon with a 4.2 rating. His headshot showed a man who looked like he'd been designed by a committee trying to create the world's most trustworthy face. I almost closed the laptop, but I'm a lawyer. I can't stop on page 1. I went to page 2. Nothing. Page 3. A consumer complaint form, anonymous, posted 2 years ago. Short. This therapist crossed boundaries with me. I filed a complaint but withdrew it because I was scared. Be careful. No name, but the zip code matched. The description of the practice matched. Solo practitioner, Brownstone, Lincoln Park. I read it 3 times. Then I closed the laptop, went back to bed, and told myself it could be anyone. There are thousands of therapists in Chicago. It was nothing. I was being paranoid again. But the splinter was in, and it was starting to throb. Which brings us back to that Wednesday, the parking lot, the closed door, the silence that wasn't silence. I've already told you what I saw. What I haven't told you is what happened inside my head in the seconds after. It wasn't chaos. It was the opposite. It was like every piece of evidence I'd been ignoring for months suddenly arranged itself on a table, labeled and indexed. The gym 2 blocks from his office, the new passcode, the lingerie she never wore for me. Amy, the phone grabs. The late nights during the trust exercise. The way Ellis told me my own eyes were lying to me. It clicked together like a deposition exhibit list. She brought me here, to him, on purpose. He used his license to take me apart. Every session was a performance. Every breakthrough was a misdirection. Every time I sat on that couch and talked about my father, they were using my own wounds as camouflage. This wasn't an affair. This was an operation. I picked up the tie. I folded it. I put it on the desk. I left. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for 11 minutes. I timed it. I didn't call anyone. I didn't hit the steering wheel. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed 5 words. Ellis, license, Caitlin, divorce, timeline. Then I drove home, poured 2 fingers of Woodford Reserve, and got to work. Caitlin came through the door around 8:30. Her eyes were red from crying or from manufacturing the appearance of crying. I couldn't tell and no longer cared about the distinction. She started from the doorway of my office. Nathan, please, let me explain. I didn't look up. Not tonight. It's not what you... Caitlin, I looked at her then. Steady. Level. The way I look at a witness who's about to perjure themselves. I said not tonight. Go to the guest room. She went. I could feel it radiating off her as she walked away, the confusion, the recalibration. She had expected screaming, accusations, tears, maybe thrown objects. That was the script she'd prepared for. She'd probably rehearsed her lines with Ellis. It was a moment of weakness. It meant nothing. I was lonely, you were never there, but I wasn't performing the scene she'd blocked out, and that terrified her more than any rage could have. I was up at 5. She was still in the guest room with the door closed. I went to my home office and started pulling thread. Here's what you need to know about what a therapist did to me in legal terms. In Illinois, under the Mental Health Code, a therapist who sleeps with a patient's spouse during the course of treatment has violated the therapeutic relationship. It's exploitation, not a gray area, not a depends on the circumstances. Exploitation. Full stop. The Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, IDFPR, is the body that licenses therapists and has the power to take those licenses away. I knew this agency well. I'd filed complaints against doctors before. In my line of work, you learn the machinery of accountability the way a mechanic learns an engine. I knew exactly which bolts to turn. The AAMFT Code of Ethics, the one that governs marriage and family therapists, is explicit. Therapists may not engage in sexual intimacies with individuals closely associated with current clients. A spouse is about as closely associated as it gets. An Illinois Administrative Code, Title 68, backs it up with state-level teeth. Violating this isn't a slap on the wrist. It's a career extinction event. And then there was the divorce angle. Illinois is no fault. You don't need to prove adultery to end a marriage. But dissipation of marital assets? That's different. If Caitlin spent our money on the affair, hotels, gifts, whatever, I could claim every dollar. Every session we'd paid Ellis for was a fraudulent expense. We weren't buying therapy. We were funding their operation. By 7 a.m., I'd filled 6 pages of a legal pad. By 8, I was calling Derek. I gave him the facts, clean, chronological, no emotion, the way I'd present a case to a judge. When I finished, Derek was quiet for a long time. Derek is never quiet. They ran a psyop on you, he finally said, in a therapist's office, using a real license. Yes, and this piece of work sat there, sat across from you, and told you that what you were seeing with your own eyes was a delusion while he was sleeping with your wife. Yes, another pause. What do you need? I need 3 more sessions. You, what? I'm going back. Nathan, I'm going to let him hang himself, but I need to be smart about it. Illinois is 2-party consent. I can't record him. Derek exhaled. I could hear him thinking. Contemporaneous notes. Exactly. Dated, time-stamped, emailed to myself after each session, creates a digital paper trail. And I'm going to request my official therapy file from him. Under the Confidentiality Act, he has to turn it over. If he's been documenting the fake therapy, his own notes will show fabricated clinical observations. If the file is thin, that's negligence. And the sessions themselves? I'm going to bring specific topics into the room. Topics designed to get him to say things on record, things that constitute malpractice. I'm going to cross-examine him in his own office, and he's not going to know he's on the stand until the verdict comes in. Derek was quiet for one more beat. Then he laughed. Not a happy laugh, the grim kind, the kind he made when he figured out how to win an unwinnable case. You're going to take his license. I'm going to take everything. I went back the following Tuesday. You should have seen their faces. Caitlin was already in the waiting room when I arrived. On time, this time. She looked like she hadn't slept. Ellis opened his office door and saw me, and for 1/10 of a second, I caught it the way you catch a trout jumping. There was fear. Then the mask clicked into place, the warm smile, the steady eyes. Nathan, I'm glad you're here. I sat down on the couch, same spot I always sat, hands on my knees. I want to talk about what happened last week, I said. Ellis nodded, therapeutic nod. Slow, measured. Of course, this is a safe space for that. I came to the office early. Caitlin was here, and I I paused, looked down, rubbed my face. I think I saw something, but I've been thinking about what you said, about hypervigilance, about my anxiety creating narratives. I looked up at him. I think I might have seen something that wasn't there. Watch his face, I told myself. Watch it like you watch a witness on the stand. And there it was, the exhale, the slight drop of the shoulders, relief. He was safe. The idiot husband was still broken. The program was still working. I caught Caitlin's face from the corner of my eye. She wasn't as sold. There was something tight around her mouth. Doubt, maybe, or suspicion that I was playing an angle, but she wanted to believe it too. She needed to. So she said nothing, and her silence gave Ellis permission to keep going. Nathan, he leaned forward. That's an incredibly mature realization. It takes real courage to question your own perceptions. Can we talk about that, about how anxiety can make you see things that aren't happening? I want to understand the clinical term for it. Ellis lit up. He was back in his element, the expert, the authority, the man with the degree on the wall. Absolutely. There's a concept called confabulation. It's when the brain fills in gaps in perception with constructed information. It's not lying. It's your mind trying to make sense of incomplete data. And when you add anxiety to that equation, especially the kind rooted in early attachment trauma. He went on for 10 minutes. I nodded. I asked follow-up questions. I let him build a clinical framework that explained away what I'd witnessed with my own eyes. A licensed therapist was telling his client that catching his wife with her shirt open on her lover's couch was a confabulated memory driven by childhood trauma. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote, November 19th, Session 8. Dr. Ellis stated that my direct observation of physical intimacy between him and my wife was likely a false memory caused by anxiety. He used the clinical term confabulation. He attributed my perception to early attachment trauma. Session lasted 50 minutes. Asterisk, I emailed it to myself at 9:47 p.m., timestamp locked. Session 9, Ellis got comfortable. He started making observations that had a sharper edge, little cuts disguised as insights. Some men have a hard time accepting that their partners need emotional intimacy they can't provide, he said, looking at me with what was supposed to be compassion, but felt like a hand on my throat. Caitlin nodded beside me, her performance pitch perfect, the supportive wife agreeing with her therapist. I took it. I let my jaw tighten, not enough to look angry, just enough to look hurt, because I was hurt. That part wasn't acting. Somewhere beneath the strategy, I was still a man sitting across from the person who was sleeping with his wife, being told that the problem was him. I appreciate that honesty, I said. It's hard to hear, but I need it. Then I dropped my hook. Do you think it would help if Caitlin did some individual sessions? With you, I mean. So she has a space to talk about things she might not feel comfortable saying in front of me. Ellis glanced at Caitlin. She gave a small nod. Practiced, subtle, like they'd discussed this. I think that's a great idea, Nathan. Individual work can complement couples therapy really effectively. Got you. A therapist conducting couples therapy cannot also see one partner individually without explicit informed consent from both parties and extremely careful boundary management. In most ethical frameworks, it's simply not done. The dual relationship creates an inherent conflict of interest. If Ellis was already having private sessions with Caitlin, or private anything, this was a compounding violation, and he'd just agreed to it on record. I noted it that night, emailed it to myself at 10:12 p.m., session 10, the last one. I brought something real. I cried. Not for the camera, not for the legal pad. I cried because I was a man who'd been systematically taken apart by someone he trusted, and the pain of that doesn't disappear just because you've decided to do something about it. I sat on that couch, and I said, I just want to be the man Caitlin needs. What am I doing wrong? And the tears came because some part of me, the part that was still the kid whose father couldn't love his mother right, meant every word. Ellis took the bait. He was so confident now, so sure he'd won, that his guard wasn't down. It was gone. Nathan, I'm going to be straight with you. Honestly, you're emotionally unavailable. Caitlin has told me things in confidence. He stopped, mid-sentence. You could see the moment he realized what had come out of his mouth. A therapist conducting couples therapy does not have confidential communications with one partner against the other. The duty runs to both clients equally. What he'd just admitted was that he had a separate, secret relationship with my wife within the therapeutic context. It's a profound ethical violation, the kind that gets read aloud at licensing hearings. I didn't flinch. I just nodded. Thank you for being honest with me, Dr. Ellis. That means a lot. I drove home, opened my laptop, started drafting. The next part required someone who could dig. So I brought in Allison Briggs. Allison was my paralegal. She was 5'2", kept her hair in a braid that looked like it could survive a hurricane, and had a research instinct that bordered on psychic. She once found a surgeon's undisclosed side business in medical tourism by cross-referencing his passport stamps with Medicare billing dates. I didn't tell her everything. I told her what she needed to know to do the job. I need you to pull the IDFPR disciplinary records for a Dr. Ryan Ellis, LMFT, licensed in Illinois, and I need you to be thorough. Allison didn't ask why. She just nodded and came back 2 days later with a folder. He's got a prior, she said, laying the file on my desk. Letter of concern, 2022, boundary issues with a female client. She filed a complaint, then withdrew it. The case was closed, but the letter's on file. He was warned. A pattern? Not just a mistake, a pattern. This man had been flagged before, and he'd learned just enough to be more careful, until Caitlin walked into his office, and whatever caution he had left went out the window. There's more, Allison said. I'd given her login access to our joint credit card account. My name's on it, my right to pull statements. She put a printout in front of me, Caitlin's credit card statements, our joint account, 3 charges at the Langham Hotel downtown, each one on a night I'd been out of town for work. $450 to $600 a night. I looked at the dates, cross-referenced with my travel calendar. Every single one matched a night I'd been in Springfield or St. Louis or Indianapolis. And this, another printout, a charge at Cartier on Michigan Avenue, $1,200. I'd never seen the piece. Whatever she bought, she hadn't worn it around me. Last thing, Allison opened a map on her screen, the gym she joined, Coreflow on Armitage. It's 2 blocks from his office. 2 blocks? She wasn't going to yoga. She was going to him. And when she came home with flushed skin and wet hair, it wasn't from a hot flow class. It was from a hot something else. I closed the folder. Good work. That's everything I need. Allison paused at the door. For what it's worth, she said, whatever this is, I'm sorry. Don't be. Just make sure the copies are clean. That night, I did something I hadn't planned. I pulled up Ellis's social media. His wife, Megan Ellis, was all over it. Family photos on a beach somewhere tropical. 2 kids grinning in Halloween costumes. A woman with kind eyes and a pediatric dental practice and a life built on the assumption that the man she married wasn't a lie wrapped in a charcoal sweater. I sat with that for a while, What I was about to do would detonate her life too, her kids' lives. It wasn't a comfortable thought, and I didn't try to make it one, but I wasn't the one who planted the bomb. I was just the one who wasn't going to let it sit there ticking. Around 10, I called my mother. I didn't tell her what was happening. I just wanted to hear her voice. "You sound tired, baby." "I am, but I'm handling it." "You always do." We talked about nothing for 15 minutes, her neighbor's dog, a recipe she'd tried, whether the Bulls had any hope this year. They didn't. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Solid ground. I picked a Monday, first week of January. The holidays were over. The city was gray and mean, the wind coming off the lake like it had a personal vendetta. Perfect weather for what I had planned. 8:15 a.m. I walked into the Circuit Court of Cook County and filed for divorce. The petition itself was straightforward, irreconcilable differences. Illinois doesn't make you say the word adultery out loud, but attached to it was a financial affidavit that told the real story. Every Langham receipt, the Cartier charge, the therapy payments, every dollar we'd paid Ellis reframed as what it actually was, funding for an affair. I argued dissipation of marital assets. I requested exclusive possession of the condo during proceedings, on the grounds that my wife had conspired with a licensed mental health professional to psychologically manipulate me, and that continued cohabitation constituted ongoing emotional harm. The clerk stamped it. I took my copies and drove to my next stop. 10:30 a.m. I filed a formal ethics complaint with IDFPR against Dr. Ryan Ellis. I'd spent 3 weeks on this document. It was the best brief I'd ever written, and I've written briefs that made insurance companies cry. The allegations: sexual relationship with the spouse of a current client, violation of the AAMFT Code of Ethics and Illinois Administrative Code, Title 68, Part 1283. Use of the therapeutic relationship to manipulate and gaslight a client for personal gain. Dual relationship violation, failure to disclose prior disciplinary action. The evidence packet was thick. My session notes, dated, time-stamped, emailed, the Langham receipts, the letter of concern from 2022, and, my personal favorite, a printout of page 147 of The Empathetic Edge, where Dr. Ryan Ellis had written, "Therapists who cross the boundary between healer and predator are not making mistakes. They are making choices, and those choices must have consequences." I'd bookmarked it with a yellow tab. 1 p.m., I filed a civil lawsuit against Dr. Ryan Ellis in his personal capacity. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, professional malpractice, fraud. He'd accepted payment for therapy he never intended to provide in good faith. He'd used his clinical authority to deliberately cause me psychological harm. I wanted compensatory damages, the therapy costs, the emotional toll, the billable hours I'd lost while he was busy dismantling my sense of reality, and I wanted punitive damages, because what he'd done wasn't negligent. It was deliberate. 3 filings, 3 different buildings, all before 2 o'clock. I went back to my office, sat at my desk, and waited for the phone to ring. Caitlin called at 3. She'd been served. I could hear it in her voice, that specific pitch of panic that comes when the ground beneath you turns out to be thinner than you thought. "Nathan, you can't do this. You have no proof. It was a mistake. It meant nothing. If it meant nothing, you wouldn't have spent 7 weeks trying to convince me I was crazy." "I'll fight this. My father will get me the best—" "Your father is a retired insurance adjuster in Naperville, Caitlin, and my filing includes every hotel receipt, every gift you bought with our money, and every session where a licensed professional told me I was delusional for seeing what was right in front of me." Silence, the kind that has weight. "I'll be fair about the condo and the accounts," I said, "but we are done. Don't contact me except through your attorney." I hung up. My hand was steady. My chest was not. Ellis called at 4. I almost didn't pick up, but I wanted to hear it the moment the therapist voice cracked. "Nathan, let's talk about this. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We can work through—" "Dr. Ellis, I'm going to give you some free legal advice, and I suggest you take it. Don't call me again. Anything you say can and will be used in the IDFPR proceeding." "And Ryan?" I used his first name deliberately. He wasn't my therapist anymore. He was just a man who'd made the worst miscalculation of his life. "I read your book. Chapter 7 was really something." I heard his breathing change. Then the line went dead. What happened next was physics, not drama. Physics. When you remove the central support from a structure built on lies, it doesn't slowly lean. It comes down all at once, and the debris hits everyone in range. Caitlin hired a divorce attorney, a good one, a woman named Karen Pratt, who worked out of a glass office in the Loop and billed like she was printing money. But even Karen Pratt, after reviewing my filings, had a come-to-Jesus conversation with her client. "This is bad," I imagine she said, or something close to it, because Caitlin called me 2 days later, through her attorney technically, but the message was Caitlin's tone, asking if we could talk settlement. That's lawyer for, "I've seen the evidence and I want this over." Caitlin tried calling Ellis. He didn't answer. When he called back the next day, his voice was ice. "We shouldn't be in contact. My attorney has advised—" "Your attorney?" I wasn't there for that conversation, obviously, but Karen Pratt relayed it to my attorney as part of settlement talks, trying to show that Ellis had abandoned her client, and the account made its way back to me. Caitlin had expected Ellis to be her partner in this, her ally, the man she'd risked her marriage for. Instead, he was lawyering up and cutting her loose. She wasn't his great love. She was a liability. She found that out the hard way. Her family found out next. Her mother, a woman whose LinkedIn title was luxury real estate specialist, and whose actual specialty was making things look better than they were, called Caitlin, not to comfort her, but to assess the damage. "You brought him to the man's office? What were you thinking?" Her sister didn't call at all. Jenna texted me around this time. I knew something was off. "I'm sorry I didn't push harder." I wrote back, "You did push. I wasn't ready to hear it. That was true. She'd tried. I'd chosen not to listen. I owned that. The twist, and this is the part I didn't see coming even though I should have, was that Caitlin turned on Ellis." Karen Pratt was smart enough to see the board. Caitlin was losing the divorce no matter what. My evidence was overwhelming. Pratt's play was to trade cooperation on the Ellis case for better settlement terms from me. She reached out to my attorney with the offer. Caitlin provides a sworn statement supporting the IDFPR complaint, and in exchange, I agree to a cleaner split on the retirement accounts and drop the most aggressive dissipation claims. I took the deal, not because I was feeling generous, because Caitlin's statement was worth more to me than the money, and Pratt, for all her reputation, made a miscalculation. She assumed the statement could be scoped, limited to the Ellis proceedings. But a sworn statement is a sworn statement. Once it existed, my attorney entered relevant portions into the divorce record too. Pratt objected. The judge allowed it. You don't get to choose which courtroom sees the truth. She confirmed everything. The relationship started before therapy. Ellis suggested she bring me in specifically to manage my suspicions. He coached her on what to say in sessions. He designed the trust exercises to give them cover. The whole thing was architected from inside his office, and she handed me the blueprints. It was devastating for Ellis, and it hurt Caitlin worse than Pratt anticipated, because the statement didn't just show an affair. It showed premeditation. She wasn't a confused wife who'd stumbled into something. She was an active participant in a deliberate psychological campaign against her own husband. The judge in the divorce saw that. The settlement terms I'd agreed to suddenly looked generous by comparison. The IDFPR moved faster than I expected. My complaint was clean, tight, documented, cross-referenced, and Ellis's prior letter of concern meant he wasn't a first-time problem. He was a pattern. Ellis hired a licensing defense attorney. I know the type. I'd faced them before, on the other side of the table, in cases where doctors tried to keep their credentials after doing things that should have cost them everything. The attorney reviewed the evidence and told Ellis what anyone with eyes could see. If this goes to hearing, you lose. Your best play is a voluntary surrender with conditions. Ellis refused. His ego wouldn't allow it. He was still Dr. Ryan Ellis, author, expert, the man who helped couples reconnect with their authentic selves. He wasn't going to sign his own death certificate. So it went to hearing. I was called as a witness, 90 minutes on the stand. I've done this before. I've testified as an expert in medical malpractice cases. I've sat in the same kind of room, under the same fluorescent lights, with the same court reporter clicking away. But this time I wasn't the attorney. I was the patient. I told them everything, chronological, calm, my notes, my emails, the hotel receipts, Caitlin's statement, the way Ellis used real therapeutic concepts, attachment theory, confabulation, the language of trauma, as instruments of control, the way he identified my specific vulnerabilities and pressed on them like bruises, week after week, while he slept with my wife 2 blocks away. Ellis's attorney tried to rattle me on cross-examination. He suggested my notes were self-serving. He implied my perception was colored by anger. He asked if I had any direct evidence of the sexual relationship beyond what I walked in on. I looked at him the way I look at opposing counsel when they ask a question they already know the answer to. I have time-stamped credit card records from the Langham Hotel on dates that correspond to my out-of-town work travel. I have a sworn statement from Mrs. Price confirming the relationship. I have a prior letter of concern on Dr. Ellis's record for the same category of misconduct with a different woman. And I have Dr. Ellis's own book, in which he writes that therapists who cross boundaries are, and I'm quoting, not making mistakes. They are making choices, and those choices must have consequences. Page 147. Would you like me to read the full passage? The cross-examination ended shortly after that. The board revoked his license, not suspended, revoked. There's a difference that matters. A suspension can be lifted. A revocation is permanent or close to it. Ellis could petition for reinstatement after 3 years, but with 2 boundary violations on his record and a board that had publicly revoked him, the odds were about the same as the Bulls' championship odds, which is to say, none. A couple of weeks after the hearing, mid-February by then, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Mr. Price?" The voice was female, controlled, but barely. "You don't know me. I'm Megan Ellis, Ryan's wife." I sat down. "Mistress Ellis, I need to know if what's in the filing is true. I could have hedged, could have referred her to the public record, but she deserved what her husband hadn't given her." "It's true." A long pause, not the silence of someone thinking about what to say, the silence of someone watching their life rearrange itself. "How long?" "Based on what I know, approximately 8 months." 8 months. Her voice got very quiet, not breaking, compressing, like something being folded down to a hard, small point. He told me he was at conferences. I know, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, you didn't do this, she hung up. 2 weeks later, she filed for divorce. Here's the final accounting, because I know you're wondering. Ellis lost his license, his practice closed. His publisher pulled the contract for his second book. His marriage ended. His civil case with me settled. $95,000 in damages. Not a fortune, I know, but the man had lost his practice, was staring down his own divorce, and his attorney fees were eating him alive. You can't squeeze blood from a stone, and Ellis was a stone by then. 95 was everything he could pull together without liquidating his house, and his wife's attorney had already put a lien on the house. I took it. The money was never the point. His name is on the IDFPR public record. Permanent. Every future employer, every licensing board in every state, every person who Googles Dr. Ryan Ellis Chicago will find it. Caitlin's divorce settlement was signed in late February. The actual decree wouldn't come until summer. Cook County moves at Cook County speed, and Illinois wants you separated 6 months before they'll stamp it final, though a judge can waive that if both sides agree. We did agree. The terms were locked in, and that's what mattered. She didn't fight hard. Her attorney knew the math. I kept the condo. Retirement accounts split 60-40 in my favor, no alimony. Her attorney didn't even ask. You try requesting spousal support from a man your client helped gaslight in a therapist's office and see how the judge looks at you. The Cartier bracelet? I didn't ask for it back. There was no point. It was never mine. The last thing I did was sit at my desk on a Friday evening, everyone else gone home, and open a new document. I typed a subject line, IDFPR Complaint Guidance, Template. I wrote a step-by-step guide, what to document, when to file, what evidence holds up, and I sent it to every medical malpractice attorney in my network. Free of charge, because somewhere out there, right now, there's another man sitting on another leather couch in another warm office with exposed brick and soft lighting, being told that his instincts are a disease. And he doesn't have a law degree. He doesn't know what IDFPR stands for. He doesn't know that the man across from him has done this before, but maybe someone hands him the template. Maybe his attorney knows what to look for. Maybe he doesn't spend 7 weeks believing that his sanity is the problem. I locked up the office, stepped outside, February in Chicago, and the wind was cutting through my coat like it had something personal against me. I walked to my car, got in, drove home, and that's the story.